Welcome to I Said What I Said, a sports podcast giving you opinions not heard anywhere else. I'm your host, Brad Wakai, alongside my co-host, Tyson Gentry. And Tyson, we're coming off a weekend that a lot of interesting things happened. It was a two-game slate, right? The NFC and AFC championship games. And I think there's so many different ways that we can talk about football, talk about teams, talk about playoff football overall. So we're going to do that. We're going to talk about all the big storylines coming out here in our recap episode here. We said it could get a little funky this weekend. What did you think of the games overall? What did you think of the product?
Run the ball. That's like the main takeaway I had from both games. Lions come out, lean on the run, blowing the doors off of San Francisco, and it's not like they completely went away from it. But what do we do? And then, I mean, I said more specifically, and I said what I said, but I said last week, um, you know, the Ravens aren't going to stop running the ball the way the Bills stopped running the ball. And they didn't even attempt to start. Like, I was so wrong on that take that it went the other way, right? And it was like, we're not even going to try to get started, which makes me right in a way, which we'll take and we'll victory lap a little bit. But there's always the talk of, how good teams win football games. But we just saw two good teams lose football games.
I think that's the thing when we talk about playoff football, when we think about it. Tyson, with the elongated season, 17 games, all these different storylines, and we're a reactionary culture now. We want to react to everything. We have to be right. Oh, okay, this happened right now. This is what's the thing going forward. And I feel like, and we talked about it a little bit with the wild card round, then moved into a little bit with the divisional round. The playoffs continues to amplify what you are as a football team, what you are as a player, and what you are as a coach. Dan Campbell was aggressive all weekend or all season, was super aggressive this weekend. The 49ers, they kind of mess around sometimes, but their talent ultimately breaks through. Happened this weekend. The Kansas City Chiefs, every time it's in the playoffs and it's tight, Mahomes and Andy Reid have a great game plan. And then we have Lamar Jackson. And it's been the same thing every single time we've gotten to that point, Tyson. And that's where I want to start first here is with Lamar, because we kind of fell for the okie doke last weekend. Like, we came on here, we said, wow, this looks like it's moving forward. This looks like it's in the right direction. And yet, once again, when asked to do things that you need to succeed in the NFL, Lamar Jackson looked inexperienced, he looked unsure, and he couldn't get the job done. There are legit questions, I think, and it's fair to have about Lamar Jackson. We know the two MVPs, but this sport is not about regular season success. It is always about what happens when the calendar flips and you're playing the best teams, the best coordinators, the best defenses, and when the speed gets ramped up a bit. And to this point in his career, Lamar Jackson has come up small. And I think it's a fair knock. Now, can he get over the hump? Of course. Like, we talk about these guys. Elway was getting crushed for a long time. Favre, like they can't ever do it. Now, they did it at the end of the career. But at this point right now, I think it's fair to say when we talk about Lamar Jackson, the running is great. The MVPs are awesome. But I think there's legit questions, and it was never more apparent when he was on the same field as Patrick Mahomes on Sunday.
Well, we talk about Lamar Jackson differently than we talk about all other quarterbacks. And so I think it's okay to talk about this part of it a little differently too. Brad, the Chiefs were susceptible all year to quarterback power. That was like the number one thing the Ravens were going to come in and run. They ran that play once on 4th and 2 for 26 yards. They didn't do it again. Gus Edwards got 3 carries, right? This was eight carries total by non-Lamar Jackson players on the Ravens. It was Look, he was bad, and he had, we'll call them Jalen Hurts moments, right? Sitting in the pocket, just kind of waiting and waiting and waiting, and then chucking the ball out of bounds or taking a bad sack. That's something that happens in the NFL, and that's something you don't want to see happen to high-level quarterbacks. But it also kind of felt like Baltimore chopped him at the knees this week. Like, the Zay Flowers play, that's you can't have him in the NFL, but there's your Heisman moment, right? That's your MVP moment. I can't believe he just did that. And then to go away from essentially everything that worked all season long to try to put, like, Todd Monken and the offensive staff felt like they gave up on the Baltimore Ravens and tried to play catch up almost immediately when they fell down 2 scores instead of playing with what got them there. Lamar Jackson wasn't good. Like, he wasn't. Was he the second, like, leading wide receiver in the game? Maybe. That was one of the coolest plays I've ever seen, by the way. But I'd like, if you're going to knock Josh Allen, we got to knock Lamar Jackson. That is true. But I think context is important because he wins differently, and the Ravens chose not to run an offense in which he succeeds. And that's kind of like the 3rd year that Lamar Jackson's been in the playoffs, and they've showed up with a game plan that doesn't make any sense?
I think that's also a fair thing, right? Like this is why when we come on this podcast, we don't do the hot take, clickbait type of stuff. Like we wanted to have conversations. Like, what's the conversation in that organization right now in Baltimore? Because John Harbaugh is a really good coach. We know that. You don't have the level of success that he sustained over the course of his career without being a good coach. For them to go into that game with that game plan, because somebody had to sign off on it, because
Yes.
no way that was Todd Monken going rogue and saying, you know what I'm going to do, and I'm going to sneak it in. We're just going to throw the ball every time. So the coaching staff had to sit in that room and they all agreed this was the strategy. That is completely inexcusable. Beyond that, it was bizarre. Like no
It
thought
was
process.
bizarre.
Like, man, this isn't working. Like, we shouldn't run the football. He said it out of the half. We need to get back to Gus Edwards. They didn't. They ran him twice. Like how? I just don't understand how that's on your forefront of your mind and you're not doing it. What's the communication like? What are people talking about? What's the sideline saying? Is anybody paying attention to what's happening? You watched what the Buffalo Bills did last week, didn't you? So to go into, I think it's on two fronts here. Lamar Jackson was poor, and there's questions about if he can do this when we get to this point of the season, right? I'm talking about elevating his game, getting to the level that Mahomes is at, getting to what Brady's done through his career, what we've seen Joe Burrow do in a stint, Matt Stafford that one year where they take their game higher. There's questions there. There's also questions on the operational standpoint now. I'm not saying in the regular season when the Ravens continue to show they can overcome injuries and win a lot of football games, win their division, become the high seeds. But in these big moments, and again, like you said, we saw it against the Titans. We just saw it against the Chiefs. For them to deviate from what they've done, their DNA, that's when you get concerned.
And it's a DNA that makes them un-F-withable during the regular season, right? They show up and they punch these guys in the face. And if you thought that Steve Spagnuolo wasn't going to have a plan for Lamar Jackson in the pass game, you're crazy. He essentially got to any fantastic job. Chiefs defense looked awesome. They deserve a lot of the credit for why the Ravens offense looked the way they did yesterday. But you basically just went into third down script all game long. And we're like, hey, just call your third down stuff, which you are notoriously one of the best to ever do it, dialing up blitzes and pass blitzes and, disguising coverages and things like that. It wasn't falling into a trap, Brad. It was just like kind of walking in with a 6-pack of beer and a pizza, like ready to hang out. That was the way they came in the game, was like, yeah, we know this is what you guys do really well, but we can beat you at it. When they haven't played that way against anybody for 17 weeks.
The Chiefs scored 0 points in the second half. And so I think we're going to come out of this game. Oh gosh, the Chiefs were just so good. Spagnuolo was incredible, and he was, but it was aided by a horrendous game plan. So let's keep that in mind here. The Ravens should have won this football game.
Before we jump to the Chiefs, I don't like I haven't this isn't a fully baked take, but at a certain point in the game, the Ravens, it appeared to me watching that they got so emotional on the sideline that they weren't going to win the game, even if the Chiefs were trying to hand it to them like they were. And no matter how many chances they got, it was like mental mistakes. Lamar's throwing the one over the middle into triple coverage. We're talking about pass interference on that play in the booth. The fourth guy that could have got to the ball, that was a bad ball. But whether it's Zay Flowers taking 15-yard penalties or Roquan Smith at the end of the game, all you need to do is touch him, right? And then it's run him over, let everything kind of run amok. But they lost the game. It felt like halfway through the third quarter. Like that sideline looked like we're yelling about everything but the football game right now, and that's not where you want to be.
Well, yeah, that's what I want to point out too. Like, I think the Ravens should have won this football game. Like, if we're watching it back, like if you watch it back, Mahomes was sensational in the first half. He had 63 passing yards in the second. The Chiefs didn't beat themselves because they were looking over there and they're like, we don't have to beat these guys. They're beating themselves, fumbling the football. Their game plan's asinine at best, and they're not emotionally in it right now. Like they're worried about other things. But 0 points in the second half from the Chiefs. Ravens knock on the door. Zay Flowers fumbles. Okay, maybe that's a turner there. It's still it's a 10-point game here. It's 17-7. You're in this football game. Okay, you score there. It's a 3-point game. But you don't. You turn it over. Things happen. You go back down. You're knocking on the door. Lamar Jackson makes an ill-advised throw. You're talking about 2 touchdowns there, and the Ravens at least are tied with those 2 possessions. We're talking about a completely different game. And so I think we're going to be looking back on this and be like, what an impressive performance by the Chiefs, and completely forgetting about the second half where it was self-destruct mode from the Ravens that ultimately did them in.
And it doesn't feel like the Ravens have won a massive game in a long time. like a decade. But we're not allowed to talk about that. We can't talk about, how they have postseason shortcomings because they're in the AFC North, and all teams in the AFC North are exempt from any sort of slander when it comes to postseason success. But it is getting like this is an issue. This is a team that hasn't won a big playoff game in like a long time. And last week against the Texans, that's cool. That's what you're supposed to do. But the Kings of the NFL just walked into your building, played perfect in the first half. Like that offense was that's if Travis Kelsey's on 17, dude, there's a comfort house, and he's getting a snack and a drink and everything because he's taking him. That was crazy the way that he played yesterday. But Andy Reid is the most don't get cute. Can't let him get too cute. Time, the clock management, and everything, and he's just completely gotten away from that side of him and started winning high leverage football games with high leverage decision making. And he's pantsing the rest of the dudes in the NFL who we look at as these tactical analytic. I'm not going to get too far ahead of myself, guys. And he just comes in, gets in his bag, and all of a sudden, maybe there's something to coaches having to go through a little bit of struggle here. Maybe it's okay, for all these guys. But at a certain point, man, like Harbaugh is the man, and he keeps losing big games.
Yeah, it's definitely interesting, right? Especially when you juxtapose those two different sidelines. And I think that was a big thing, right? We look at what the game plan Harbaugh came up with and his coaching staff came up with, and we look at the comparison of the quarterback play with Lamar Jackson, Patrick Mahomes, and Tyson. Once again, it just night and day. This guy just completely rewrites everything that you've ever thought about quarterback play. Like him and Brady are like the two, when it gets tough, when it gets hard, they elevate. And you can't really explain it because this offense, it was dead. Like it was dead in the regular season. The receivers couldn't catch the ball. All of a sudden, they're like MVS is looking like Randy Moss in the two playoff games. Patrick Mahomes, 30 of 39, 241, pass rating 105, QBR 91.1, just decimated the best defense in the NFL in the first half. Got on script. It's like, okay, we're going to punch you in the mouth early. Let's see if you can handle it. And the Ravens didn't. And that's by design, I think. Like they knew, okay, if we come in and we throw a big right hand early, let's get our best player involved, best weapon involved in Travis Kelsey, have him feel the game. Everybody else will respond off of that. It's going to be tough for the Ravens to come back. And ultimately that was the thing. But Tyson, when you have 15 on your sideline, God, it's just hard to lose games when he's not making mistakes.
That's got to be a good feeling, right? Like if you're a Kansas City Chiefs fan and the whole world is counting you out, and you're like, yeah, but you've seen our guy. Like you understand. I mean, it took 15, not 15. It took a long time in Tom Brady's career for people to be like, okay, he's better than Joe Montana. Like that wasn't until like the last couple in New England where it was like, okay, not debatable anymore. Good luck finding somebody that thinks Pat Mahomes isn't two, like in the history of the NFL for quarterbacks, and probably rightfully so. I mean, he's going to another one with a good shot to win it, and we'll talk about that all of the coming week. But look, there's certain things in sports you don't go against. You don't bet against LeBron James in Eastern Conference Playoff Series. You don't bet against pick whatever you want. Coaches that just get their interim tag and the team's going to come out fired up. Don't bet against Pat Mahomes in the playoffs. Like it's to the point where it's like you are actively burning money. And I don't have an explanation for it. You listed off a bunch of stats, but the one I didn't hear was third down. He was magnificent in just moving the chains. And it wasn't, I need 15 right here. It was, okay, I'm just going to go get 4 with my legs. We're going to reset. We're going to take 3 more minutes off this clock. And Baltimore is going to come out and throw it deep 4 times. We get the ball. Like it was, you don't have to throw for 350 yards to put on a masterclass. You just have to play like that.
Yeah, I'll lift off a couple more here just to add to the point. EPA per dropback, 0.23. That's 73rd percentile. EPA per pass, 0.20, 68th percentile. Late down success rate, 52.4%. That's the 68th percentile. Negative play rate,
best defense in the league.
It's unbelievable just what they were able to. And we're not playing the Colts here. Like this isn't the Colts defense. This is the Baltimore Ravens who had the best defense all season long and came in dominating. And for the Chiefs offense, now I think it is Mahomes, right? Like he's an unbelievable talent. The game plan by Andy Reid, like you saw it, east to west. Like when you thought they were going over the middle of the field, just for having Mahomes flick it out, like on the little jet sweep or the little bubble screen, Get a couple other guys involved. Pick up a couple yards here and there. Have them thinking like, oh man, we thought they were going to do this. No, we'll just flip it out there. We'll take what yards you get. Just to completely kind of befuddle Mike McDonald. It was super impressive. And it's got to be a luxury for Andy because he's like, well, I can just call these plays because I know he's going to put the ball in the right spot. If we do get into a off script situation where it's a 3rd and 7, a 3rd and 6, you think I'm worried this guy's going to make a play. And then when you have Travis Kelce, the connection that he and Mahomes have, it's a really tough team to beat no matter who the receiver unit is.
Can we admit that Isaiah Pacheco is a good player now?
I think we have to.
I think you have to because like for even after the 100 yards in the Super Bowl, it's like 7th round rookie on the Chiefs. They're not even planning for the run first, and then all year long he's been kind of option A. Like let's get the game rolling here with Pacheco, and he's delivered every single time. This dude's a PTPer, man, primetime performer. The playoff Pacheco is real. He's fantastic. Marquez Valdez, when he caught that pass, the deep shot there at the end of the game, it was like as the ball is in the air, right? You're having flashbacks to when he drops it against the Eagles. You're having flashbacks to all the times he dropped the ball in Green Bay. You pick a spot, and when he caught that one, just immediately, all I thought was like, well, they're going to win the Super Bowl. Like this is coming together for the Kansas City Chiefs to go win another one, and count them out. Everybody, us included. Like this wasn't a team that we thought was going to win the Super Bowl after Week 11. And they are 60 minutes away.
Pacheco, 24 carries, 68 yards, only 2.28 on the ground average. Now, that's not what I'm like, whatever about. I'm looking at the 24. You're a good player if Andy Reid's handing you the ball 24 times. Let's just put it that way.
And how many receptions?
He had 4 receptions.
Yeah, so he touched the ball almost 30 times against the best defense in the NFL. And I don't. 68 or whatever is not very impressive on the surface. It's how he gets the yards. Like it's just how he just churn. Dude, they are the most explosive clock control offense in the NFL.
And it's because Mahomes can just beat you at any point over the top. You kind of Rashee Rice 8 more catches in this one. The dude's just a certified one man. I liked him in college coming out. I didn't think it would happen this quickly, but you're elevated when you play with 15. That's the case. And we've seen that, and he's proven it again. And now they're in another Super Bowl. Tyson, a team that probably people think should be in there are the Lions. Heartbreaking loss for Detroit. And the conversation is around, was Dan Campbell over aggressive? Did Dan Campbell blow it? And before I pass it to you, I have a real issue with all this stuff, like that how people discuss 4th down decisions. Because if you're in the camp where you're like, just always take the points, that's fine. Or if you're in the camp, like just always be aggressive, that's fine. But I hate the flip-flop on it when there's no nuance, because it's either Dan Campbell's an idiot for doing this or Dan Campbell's an idiot for not going for it. Like you can't have it both ways. And I feel like that's been the discourse, or you're an idiot because you don't believe in analytics. So that's the third option in there. I think 2 things can be true here. And that's where I think we're missing on a lot of this. In that moment, I would have kicked the field goal.
Which one?
Probably all 3.
To go back up 17, at least to go up to the 3 possession one. I think that's probably the one everybody's talking. That's the main one that pops in my head.
Definitely the one at halftime I would have done, and I would have kicked the other 2 for sure. Me personally, I just think that's kind of like my DNA. Like, all right, if I get an opportunity for points on a possession, I know it's very few times that you get. It's not basketball, right? You're not going up and down the court every single time. This isn't Big 12 football. So I think especially in these moments, and if you have the Niners on the ropes, take the points. But at the same time, Dan Campbell's shown that they're going to go for it. This offense has converted big 4th downs. This offense is aggressive. They want to push the ball down the field. And so I think deviating away from that in the biggest moment, I think that would have been the bigger issue, in my opinion. The fact that he went for it, I think, shows conviction, shows that the Lions have believed in what they built. The problem, I think, maybe is after losing and not having an opportunity to go to the Super Bowl, there's some people kind of dwindling their head. Oh man, maybe this isn't the right idea. I don't know. We're not in that locker room. The media can speculate. Everything else can be of that. Logan Ryan, I heard on the herd today, said he was thinking that was the wrong decision on the sideline. That's the other player. So that's another perspective, right? But I think to have it both ways here, where it's like, oh, well, I would have criticized him if he kicked the field goal, but I'd also criticize him for it if he went for it. I just hate that. That drives me nuts.
Rob Parker on my way home said that he should be fired, which I thought was pretty hilarious and worth mentioning when you're talking about media takes. I don't have an issue with either of or any of the fourth downs except for the one to go up three possessions. Three possessions is three possessions. I don't like 21 versus 17 makes no difference to me when we're counting possessions at the end of the game. Now, we can have a different discussion on if Josh Reynolds should have caught a pass. And then the whole thing is flipped, and then the Lions win the game, and Dan Campbell's a genius and all that stuff. What I don't understand, and what I didn't understand during the game, is why take the points at the end of the second half if you're not going to take them in a similar situation to start the third quarter? I understand, we're going into the half, good momentum and everything. You don't want to not convert and then go to the half and kind of the winds out of your sails a little bit. But they're almost identical situations, and so that's Dan Campbell reading his guys, reading the vibe of the game and everything, and that's what a CEO head coach does, right? Dan Campbell's not calling plays. Dan Campbell's not scheming the defense. Dan Campbell is there to be the boss, and the boss makes those calls, and you live and die by those calls. Go up three possessions. It's also the dude's first NFC title game. Like the Lions should have won the game. We're only having this conversation because of the 49ers comeback, and it's kind of taken away from the screws tightening with that Niners defense on the Lions offense in the second half. And Ben Johnson's, scheme was awesome until it was just Laporta only over the middle because he's the only guy who's open. They were running the crap out of the football too for a long time in that game. And then they went like just away from it enough to not pick up first downs, to not keep the clock moving. And look, that's kind of what I was saying with the Andy Reid thing. Harbaugh's a little too old, to get the benefit of that doubt. But this is Dan Campbell's first real trip to the show. He's going to be who he is. Next year, if he's making the same mistakes and they lose a game, let's have a conversation. This year, I don't have any issue with it at all. That's who they are. I think, every analytics department in the league would say go up three possessions when you can go up three possessions. What else do you like? Was he supposed to just be like, all right, let's just only kick field goals and play defense? That's not who the Lions are. That's not who Dan Campbell is. You dance with who brung you, man.
And that's the thing, right? Like, if the Dan Campbell said from the start, they're going to be aggressive. He showed you they're going to be aggressive. And so in the biggest moment, to go away from that, I think is when you're like, man, is this guy getting a little tight on the sidelines? Is this guy getting a little nervous? To be like, no, we're confident. The players are confident. They know in that situation they're going to go for it. I guess I would have kicked the field goal. That's just who I am. But he's shown his DNA in this offense. They've shown that they want to go for it. So I don't know why you would deviate. Now, obviously, when you look back at scoreboard watch, well, they had two chances and they lost by 3. Okay, what happens if Badgley misses a field goal? We're having a different conversation. Okay, so instead of going for it on fourth, he kicks the field goal, he misses. It's the same situation, right? Like, the numbers say that, from this yardage, he kicks it 79% of the time, and it's only 50-50 from this yardage here. We know what happens in these games. Things happen. It's football. He had a more confidence, and Jared Goff and his offense, who's been doing it all season long, to pick up a first down. And let's be honest, hit Josh Reynolds in the hand and he dropped it. Like, that's a catchable ball. You got to make that play. He didn't. And now we're talking about the Lions missing out on a Super Bowl trip. If you want to be critical of Dan Campbell, I think you're in your right to do that. Certainly are. Like, we're talking about taking points off the board. It's been a conversation that we've been having as analytics jump into this more. But I don't think you can criticize him for staying true to what he is. Now, if you think he needs to tone it down a little bit, like, oh, he's just reckless, all right, that's your opinion. It's worked for the Lions so far. They were 12-5, probably should have been 13-4, second seed overall in the NFC, and they had a damn good shot at making it to the Super Bowl. So that seems pretty good to me. So trying to get this guy fired or saying he's an idiot from a couple decisions here is just asinine, and it's why the conversation around football in this country has gotten way off the rails.
Well, it's the same conversation that we had after week 1 against the Chiefs when he just we ran a fake punt on 15 or whatever. I love Dan Campbell. This is no other coach in the league would do this. And then the season got bookended because it didn't work. That's how football works. Things move fast. Guys drop passes. You lost the football game. The game wasn't going to end 30 or by a 3-point margin with that exact score if they kick those field goals, because the game's not going to play out the way that it would have. You can't sit here and go, well, if they had 6 more points, they would have actually won by 3. No, because San Francisco would have played them differently, because they would have made different decisions on offense and defense from those points. The game played out the way that the game played out. We did talk about in the preview show last week that the main thing we were concerned about, like you had the Niners kind of rolling in this one. I thought the Lions were going to stick around. I thought Dan Campbell was going to get too cute. That was like my main concern. I don't count this as getting too cute. I think this was the Lions being who they are. Like if they would have, Amon-Ra St. Brown is throwing the ball to Jared Goff 40 yards up the sideline, that's what I meant. So I don't want to hear the too cute talk or anything like that. We get it. He didn't make the right decision. Kyle Shanahan's made the wrong decision a handful of times. John Harbaugh just made the wrong decision. Andy Reid's made plenty of wrong decisions. Those are three of the best coaches in the NFL. It takes time.
Yeah, and these are the same people criticizing him for not kicking a field goal who were criticizing Nick Sirianni because he punted last year in the Super Bowl too. Like, you got to go for it. What are you doing? Like, that's the type of stuff that drives me crazy. So it's a tough way for the Lions to lose, being up and dominating that game. Like, they looked like the flat out better football team for 30 minutes of this thing. Like, they're pushing around the Niners. You mentioned it, 29 carries, 182 on the ground. That's 6.3 a pop. And all we've heard is this Niners defense, this and that. And they took it to him physically from the jump, and then things just fell apart for him in the second half, and that's what happens. It's like all these analytical guys too. Momentum's not a real thing. Well, why? Because you can't quantify it in your spreadsheet. Like, have you ever been around when there's momentum happening, when people are building, and you can kind of feel the energy shift, and you're like, oh, we're starting to get a little confidence, a little buzz here and there. That's what happened. We saw it was palpable that the momentum shifted, and you can't tell me because you can't put it in your little Excel doc that's not a real thing. Like, I'm sorry, these are sports. When people are hot, they're hot. You ride the hot hand. How many times? It's the adage as old as time in the sport.
I thought this game was fantastic, and I'm a little bit upset by, like, I wake up today and the discourse is all negative stuff. Like, Brock Purdy looked bad for a half. Brock Purdy figured it out. The Lions looked fantastic for a half. The Niners figured them out. It was a road game against the best team in the league all season long, or at least who we all agreed until Christmas was the best team in the league. And they came back and won because they have superstars. Like, sometimes superstars just win games, man. That's kind of what happened in this one. I don't get it. A week ago, all we cared about was that the Lions had made it this far and how cool that was. And then this week they lost, and it's, oh man, I hate the Lions.
Yep, just completely ridiculous, completely absurd. So let's transition into the positive here to close out, because Brock Purdy was not good again to start. I thought he looked shaky. He had the interception. The offense was sputtering. Once again, in the second half, Brock Purdy led the comeback, and this happened to be the largest comeback in NFC Championship game history. Now, was it all on Purdy? No. Defense made plays. They forced a fumble. Christian McCaffrey busted a couple. You had Brandon Ayuk with just an insane catch. So it all rolled right for him, right? But for that to happen, your quarterback has to stand in there and make some throws. Your quarterback has to be confident in that huddle. Your quarterback has to be a leader of this group. And I thought Brock Purdy did that. Like, nothing changed. Just went about his business, did the same thing. And we're talking about the 49ers making another comeback, probably a game they should have lost. But it was really led by someone who's Mr. Irrelevant, somebody who's people want to put him top 5, but others want to say he's bottom 3, type of deal. Not that extreme, but some people are really high on him. Some people don't believe in him. And it hasn't changed how the 49ers have operated. I'll put it that way. Shanahan has a system. He has his style. They do what they do. And Brock Purdy's operating to an excellent level, at least in the second halves of these games or the fourth quarter against the Packers. But he's shown that he has the ability to do it. I think this will just continue to give him confidence moving forward.
Is Brock Purdy the fastest quarterback in the NFL? Like, what the hell was that, dude?
He had some wheels in that game.
He was moving. That didn't make any sense to me. That broke my brain watching it. But I thought you broke that down pretty well. He had a couple dropped interceptions again. But at a certain point, like, it's not necessarily something you can continue to hone in on, because, like, next year, if they catch those interceptions, then we'll have a conversation about Brock Purdy. This year, they're not catching them. The 49ers are winning football games because of it. Brandon Ayuk's 51-yard catch that led to a touchdown, that was kind of when it felt like, oh, this might flip. Like, when he comes down with that was I think it was Kirby Joseph. That was an interception. Like, that hits you in the chest, or at least a batted ball 9 times out of 10, right? It wasn't in this game. Brock Purdy was using his legs in a way that was something that we haven't seen him do very often. George Kittle is open again over the middle of the field, and sometimes there's not anybody within 10 yards. Debo Samuel comes back from the injury and 7 catches or however many that he had. Big game for him. I just look, there's something to be said about orchestrating an offense. And he's not top 5 and he's not bottom 3. He's closer to top 5 than he is to bottom 3. But when we do this, we only talk about Mahomes, Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson, like these guys at the tippy top of the league. And we don't acknowledge the fact that there's like 16 dudes who can't run a system right now or who are struggling to do what they're asked. And maybe their scheme is worse than San Francisco's and their players are worse. And that's almost certainly true. He's operating it better than Jimmy G did. And we're going to find out in 2 weeks what the real difference is. Like they're facing same colors, different boogeyman.
You mentioned the stars. Let's go through them because Debo caught 8 balls for 89 off the comeback, almost scored a touchdown. Christian McCaffrey, 20 carries, 90 yards, 2 touchdowns. Also caught 4 balls for 42 yards. Brandon Ayuk, touchdown, had that great play. Fred Warner, 13 tackles, 9 of them were solo. Dre Greenlaw, 7 tackles, 3 of them were solo. And then how about Nick Bosa, 3 tackles, 2 sacks. And that's what we talk about.
Eric Armstead with the fumble recovery.
When we talk about stars on these teams, right, or especially the Niners, it's a loaded roster. You need them to show up, and that's what they did.
It's a little bit overwhelming. It kind of feels like you're watching the Warriors at times. It's like, oh man, there's another guy making a play. Like it's just another guy. Haven't called your name. By the way, did you see when Dre Greenlaw absolutely flattened Sam Laporta over the middle, and Laporta gets up talking smack, and Greenlaw goes inside? That was the weirdest thing of the weekend for me. That didn't make any sense.
Yeah, well, he got that stinger. I just saw his shoulder. I was like, oh boy. But
how did Laporta know?
Man, he's just a Midwestern guy. He's tough as nails. He's like, I'll get some hits, man.
He stood up over him like he knew he just gave him a stinger. That was the craziest thing. But on the 49ers, this was for the first half, it was like, is Shanahan actually going to come up small again? And they didn't go away from what they do well. And that's kind of what the juxtaposition to the Ravens. It was like that game was there for the taking for them, and they went away from what they do well, and they lost the game. San Francisco didn't lose faith in the process. And in the preview show, we kind of mentioned that if this thing gets rolling, it can get rolling really quick against this Lions defense. And they were back in the game by the start of the fourth quarter. And they end up, going up by 10 and just completely taking the reins. That's not something we've seen this team do, and it's not something we saw them do against Green Bay. This isn't the same kind of comeback. This was something brand new that has to give you a heck of a lot of confidence going into the big one.
We said the Niners don't play well coming from behind, right? That was the discourse. We haven't seen Purdy do it, and when they have been behind, it hasn't looked good. Well, 2 weeks in a row in the biggest moments, they've been able to do that. The Niners as a team, it's not just one guy, it wasn't just one unit. It's really as a team being able to do that. So I think that it's interesting. It adds another element that we didn't think was going to happen. And the whole thing about Shanahan, right? You get down, it's not built to play from behind. And well, like you said, they just trusted what they were going to do. And there's a lot of things coming out of that locker room where they're saying nobody was nervous, nobody was yelling, nobody was panicking. Or he said, we just got to get stops, guys. And then the offense just moved the chains. And they did that. Momentum went on their side. Yes, it's real. And all of a sudden now they're playing in the Super Bowl. So I think this is going to be an interesting match, a matchup. I think a lot of people are talking about, oh, we've seen this before. We don't, whatever the case may be, and however negative spin they want to put on it. But this to me is, can Mahomes put the team on his back? And like Tyson said, we're going to do a whole preview of this. So we're just jumping our early thoughts here. Can Mahomes put the team on his back again? He's been perfect in terms of turnovers and decision-making in the playoffs so far. Or do the 49ers finally have the point guard that can get all of their star players the ball at the right spots? Because they almost did it before. It was just the point guard missed the pass by just a little bit, just a little too much.
Bro, he threw that over the backboard. He threw it over the backboard. He missed Goodwin by like 5 yards. Like he missed him. This was probably the least intriguing matchup that we could get for the Super Bowl. It's still the Super Bowl. You're still going to watch. Like it doesn't change anything. Yeah, the Lions making it would have been awesome, and we didn't really want to see Mahomes back here. Both those things happened because the teams who showed up better prepared won on Sunday, and you're not going to care in 2 weeks. In 2 weeks, people are going to almost forget entirely the way that these games went. Besides, Ravens couldn't get it going, and Lions. The Lions choke will be all anybody really remembers. Lions gonna lie.
All right, let's get out of here. Like, subscribe, and share the show. Smash the like button on the way out if you're watching on YouTube. If you're listening in podcast form, please rate, review. 5 stars are preferable. Send us a comment if you'd like as well. And stay connected with us on socials, X, Instagram, TikTok. It's the same handle at ISWIS_pod. Tyson alluded to it. We got a ton of Super Bowl coverage coming for you the next couple of weeks. We're going to do a filthy episode for the Eagles fans out there. We're going to be breaking down the offensive and defensive coordinator hires, new staff getting filled out. So if you're an Eagles fan, we got you covered on that front. Plus, little fun wrinkle we got next couple weeks. We're going to be going through some coaching hires, and once the cycle is officially complete, and we're going to give our awards for the year too. Not who we think is going to win, who Tyson and I would give the awards to. So we got some fun stuff coming out, and of course, previewing the Super Bowl as we get closer and closer to that matchup. So we will speak to y'all later in the week. Until then, guys, peace.